Hi everyone and welcome to another video. This is going to be all of my pickups for the first half of October. There is a lot to get through, but before I get into any of the actual things that I bought or received in the mail over these last 2 weeks, I did want to talk about something that I think a lot of people may know if you've been following my Twitter, but currently there's a Kickstarter running from Nozomi Entertainment or Right Stuff, their licensing branch. They are trying to fund the English dub and Blu-ray release of one of their titles, one of my favorite titles, in fact, Emma, a Victorian Romance. We have hit funding. It was $110,000, but for season 2, we need to hit an $180,000 stretch goal to completely dub the show. So if you are interested in that series, maybe give it some money just to support that release. I have pledged, I have almost backed every single anime Kickstarter that there is, but this one, like with Skip Beat, is very near and dear to my heart. I've watched Emma years and years ago. It's no surprise that I'm a big fan of Kaoru Mori's work. I talked about A Bride Story as well as the manga version of Emma multiple times. Cannot recommend it highly enough. And of course, Emma, Victorian Romance is a 2-season adaptation of Mori's Emma manga. It's a fantastic show, but even when I had watched it initially, I had always wanted an English dub for the series. Mainly, and I'm not one who really like prioritizes dubs or subs over each other. I don't really care, generally. But this show is one that's set in Victorian England, so understandably an English dub is probably more suited to it than like a Japanese audio performance. And that's not to say that the Japanese dub is terrible. It's not. It's fantastic. But for those who maybe are a fan of dubs or just a fan of the show and want a really well put together, period accurate British English dub, that's what Nozomi has actually promised us. And for me, who has always wanted that, it was no question that I would support this Kickstarter. Now, there will be a general release after the fact, like there is going to be with Emma, but like with their previous Kickstarter, Aria, like with their previous Aria Kickstarter, the limited edition, like chipboard box will not be available after the fact. And even if you don't have the money necessarily for the discs right now, if you do donate a small amount, $1, $5, $10, you still get access to the Slacker Backer afterwards. So if you're not, super keen on spending the money right now, you can still put in a couple of bucks and then after the fact have access to getting the release before the general public does. But again, I do have to mention you can't get that chipboard box set after the fact. After the funding period has ended, it will only be the quote-unquote standard Kickstarter release. There's also a fantastic art book which has been added to as an add-on through multiple different stretch goals. We're working hard. We're less than 5,000 off of getting that in a hardcover. And we are super, super close to our goals. We have less than 30,000 to go until we get to that season 2 dub with a little over 3 days to do it. And if you have any familiarity with Kickstarter, the final 48 hours is the most crucial. A lot of people come back in because they set remind me notification. So a lot of people do come into the last 48 hours and support the project. So as I said, if you are a fan of the series, or you like supporting English dubs, or you like supporting niche titles in the US, or just wanting to upgrade your copy of the series to Blu-ray, that is currently ongoing. I'm going to put a link in the description below, so any of you who may be interested can check it out and hopefully join us in trying to fund this fantastic project. But yes, I'm going to stop shilling for Right Stuff and get straight into my pickups. I hope you guys enjoy. So first up we have an anime. This is just the standard release of Toradora, the complete series. So English dubbed and subbed. This is a show that I have seen. I watched it years and years and years ago. I've actually owned it in a couple iterations. I used to own the NIS America sets, and then I also used to own the Hanabi, which this release is from Hanabi as well. The Hanabi limited edition set, which was the dubbed DVDs, and I've sold both of those on, again, years ago now at this point. I think even before I was doing these sorts of videos for my collection. And I bought this standard set because, one, it's Blu-ray, so sort of upgrading, and it was really, really cheap. Hanabi is currently having a sale on all of their anime titles, I believe, 50% off. And so I picked it up. It was, I think, $15, $20, something like that. So for the entire 24 episode series, I couldn't pass on that. 24, 25, something like that. It's a really well-regarded romantic comedy drama series. I think most people know of it, even if they haven't seen it. It's regarded as one of the best. I personally don't think it's like the best of the best, but I do enjoy it for what it is. Really solid show, some great characters in there, and yeah, I'm happy to finally own it on Blu-ray because this is the first time I have owned it on Blu-ray. And again, I'm happy with just like the standard case. I don't really need anything too flashy or limited edition for this series. Next is a US release, and I got this just today, so I haven't had the opportunity to watch it, although I have seen some of the movies in this, and that is the Free Movie Collection, the limited edition box set, which contains all 4 movies. So we have High Speed, Free Starting Days, which is a prequel film about Makoto and Haru and in their starting middle school, and it's also where the characters Ikuya and Asahi from the 3rd season are initially introduced in the show. That film is generally based on the 2nd light novel. Then we have the Free Timeless Medley, the Bond and the Promise movies. These 2 are exclusive to this box set. They're both recap films of the Eternal Summer 2nd season. They're not must-haves for everyone, of course. They are mainly just recap of the 2nd season. From the Bonds is from the Iwatobi perspective, so Haru, Makoto, Nagisa, Rei. And then The Promise is from the Samazuka perspective, so you have Rin and Sosuke and Momo and Nishiri. So you're getting pretty much a very comprehensive overview of the series through those films. It also has, both of them have new animation, mainly at the start. New scenes, which is maybe a good reason to pick them up, but as I said, unless you're like a super fan like I am, I make no secret about that, those 2 films aren't really necessary to understand the entire Free franchise or anything like that. And then finally we have Free Take Your Marks, which is a sequel to Free Eternal Summer, but a prequel to Free Dive to the Future, which is the 3rd season. So it slots pretty perfectly between those 2 seasons, and it's a sort of branch from the end of Rin and Haru and Makoto and Sosuke's final year at school, so graduation, and then starting university in Tokyo / Sydney / doing their thing after graduation. It's less of a proper movie with like a 3-act structure like High Speed is. It's more a vignette of probably half hour starring different groups of characters. There is a part in the film about Iwatobi filming their recruitment video for the next year's students to try and get more members for the swim club. There's a part where Samazuka go to a onsen for vacation. It's a bunch of, I think there's 4 different stories, and they're all pretty good. They all have that same tone and feel of a regular episode of Free. So yeah, it's pretty much what you've come to expect from the series, if you are a fan of it. Beautiful box that matches the other box sets, limited edition box sets of this series. And of course, as I've mentioned, I'm a big fan of the series, so it was no question for me to pick up these particular releases. These two films come with art books, and this one comes with art cards. So you do get a couple extras with this box set. I don't know if those art books / cards come in the regular releases of these two. I don't know. They all 3 also come with like digital copies, which are redeemable on Funimation's streaming service, I guess. So yeah, I have seen all of these movies in some capacity previously, but I'm really, really, really happy to have them on my shelves. I really want to rewatch High Speed, actually, because that is a pretty great film. And for those who didn't see it before the 3rd season aired, just last season, it's probably a good thing to retroactively watch, because it does, as I said, introduce characters that are fairly important for the 3rd season, namely Ikuya and Asahi, but also Natsuya and Nao. So, you know, there's reasons to watch it, even if you still haven't seen it yet. Next, we're going to go into manga, and there is a lot here, so I'm going to try and work very quickly. The first one is the first title I've ever bought from this particular publisher, but it is Ryo Hanada's Goodbye Geist. This was put out by Gen Publishing. They do have probably about a dozen manga that they've put out in some capacity. I've read 3 or 4 of them, and they're very, reviews are very spotty and generally low for a lot of their titles. These books, from what I understand, the series that they release are glorified doujinshi. They're not things that were ever properly published in Japan, so it's more of a collaborative effort between like Japanese artists and this particular publisher. At least that's what I've come, that's my understanding of it. And for me, I had my eye on this book for a while, because as many of you probably know, I'm a fan of Ryo Hanada's other work, Devil's Line. So this is obviously something she did previously, and looking at reviews, there's quite a few mixed and sort of middling opinions. It's not, having read it, it's not perfect. I don't think it's, you know, groundbreaking or anything, and you can tell she definitely didn't necessarily have the grounding that she does now in how she writes her stories. A lot of people said it was hard telling the characters apart, and I don't know whether it's because I'm used to Devil's Line, so I'm used to her art style, but I didn't personally have that issue, although there are a lot of just guys with black hair in this and in Devil's Line, so I can understand the confusion. but I don't think that it was necessarily that confusing. I bought this. I bought another one. I bought 3 or 4 of these titles that Gen Publishing put out on Kindle, actually, because all of their titles are available digitally for, I think, $1.99, something around that. So very cheap if you are curious and you don't want to pay the $12 or $15 for the book itself. That might be an option. And as I said, some are better than others. And I enjoyed this one enough where I found it interesting enough that after my first read that I was happy to pick up the book itself. I think the strongest thing about Gen is their cover design. All of their covers are really interesting and appealing. And as I said, this book in particular isn't the greatest thing. It's obviously an amateur work or a doujin, but I do like Hanada. I think there's a lot of potential in this story, and interestingly, following her Twitter, I think there is an actual publishing of this book coming out in Japan very, very soon, or it's just recently been put out by a proper publisher. So it's interesting timing. I saw that after I had bought this book, but I saw that on her Twitter. So interesting to see that this has sort of become a little bit more well known as her work. And this did come out before Devil's Line here in the Western society. So it is the first of her published work in English. And yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff about it, and with Devil's Line wrapping up soon, I look forward to reading more of her series in the future. Next, we have Volume 5 of Sularun, The Girl from the Other Side by Nagabe. This is a fantastic, almost folklore-infused fairy tale. It's hard to fully describe this one, but it reminds me a lot of really twisted traditional folklore stories, and yeah, traditional fairy tales, and this sort of underlying tension and weirdness and creepiness. And I absolutely adore it. This is a really, really wonderful atmospheric story that does have a lot of those weird iterations and questions about strange monsters and things happening, but it also is fundamentally a story about family and caring about other people and not judging others by how they look. It has some really heartwarming messages and some really great character interactions. So it is more than just a atmospheric, moody piece. It does present this sort of wholesome feel to it as well, which is why I really like that balance. I think the characters are written really well, and the mystery is very interesting. Yeah, Volume 6 is just coming out in Japan now. Again, I saw on Twitter the cover for it, so hopefully we'll be seeing that soon. I do think the series was on hiatus. Either was on hiatus previously or it's still on hiatus. So it's slow going from here on out, but whenever more of this does make it to English, I'm sure that I will enjoy it immensely, because it is a really, really interesting one and very unlike anything else that we are getting currently. The second title I got from Seven Seas is Go Nagai's Cutie Honey, the classic collection. This is the complete series in one large hardcover omnibus in the same style as Devilman. I haven't had a chance to read this one yet, but Cutie Honey is incredibly influential, and I've seen bits and pieces of like the anime adaptations of Cutie Honey, but I never sat down and actually read the manga. So I am really interested to get into this one. It's been said before by me and others that Seven Seas is doing a great job with their classics line. I'm really looking forward to the second half of Devilman in this month. I think it comes out this month. So yeah, excited to get into that. I know that there's some Leiji Matsumoto stuff coming out as well from them. Is it Captain Harlock, I think they're putting out, because Queen Emeraldus is Kodansha. So I think, yeah, it's Harlock, isn't it? I'm pretty sure. And there's 2 out of 3 or so volumes of that already out as well. So lots to look forward to. I'm hoping that we do get some more classic series announced from Seven Seas, because I do hope these series are selling well for them. It's really nice to have some of these series that do have such an influential impact on sort of manga and anime trends as a whole, because a lot of tropes and things like that were either started or reinvented by a lot of these classic series, and up until now here in the West we just never had the exposure to them, which is a shame. So it's nice that we finally are seeing or having these series available that inspired countless others in coming later decades. So yeah, I'm hoping that I can get to this one sooner rather than later, because it is one that I'm really looking forward to. Next we get into some Viz manga, the first being a older release, and that is Kakashi Volume 2. I mentioned in my last video that I'd be getting this volume. It took a long time to get to me, but I've read it. It is really good, and I have a couple other volumes of this series on their way to me. I'm enjoying this series a lot. Much more than I think I expected to, and again, this is a series I haven't heard a huge amount about from a lot of people. I think it's very much under people's radars because it's older, it's longer, and it never had the hype that other series from the similar time frame did. So it was sort of just skipped over by a lot of people. But I'm really, really liking it, and I hope that continues. Just some pretty typical shonen stuff, but it does have some interesting character writing and a lot of potential, so I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes from here. Next for manga, we have My Hero Academia, Volume 15. Again, like with some other series that come out very quickly, this is coming out a new volume comes out every 2 months, I believe. It's really fun, it's great, it's a pretty typical shonen, but I think one of the better ones. It's definitely got a sense of fun and adventure and purpose, and it's very appealing for this current generation of fans, both new and old, and I think it does appeal to a lot more people than even some other like very popular and critically acclaimed series that we've seen in previous years. My Hero Academia, I think, has a staying power that some other titles might not have. So in that sense, I do think it goes a little bit beyond what other like introductory series might do. But yeah, I mean, it's a fun action shonen. It's exactly what you expect it to be. I am enjoying how the series is developing. I do like the characters for the most part. I think the same as everyone else. And there's some really interesting stuff going on. It's not just, you know, cookie cutter heroes, this is what you expect, this is what we're going to do. And I think that's, it does have a little bit of imagination mixed in with the formula. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the next couple volumes because I know there's like new arcs starting up and there's some really interesting stuff going on. I'm so far behind on the anime. I haven't watched any of the 3rd season yet. But again, I think this is one that is a really good starting point for a lot of people. It's definitely going to become sort of this new generation of anime and manga fans introductory series, like Death Note was for me, like, you know, Naruto and One Piece and Bleach was for other people, or Dragon Ball or Sailor Moon. You have these generations of fans coming in, and My Hero Academia is just sort of the new face to that cycle. And that's not a bad thing. I think there's definitely a place for this, and I think the series really does appeal to fans, both new and old, and just sort of what people are expecting, and it presents, you know, a very hopeful, interesting, adventurous story that almost anyone can enjoy. So yeah, I mean, everyone's reading it, everyone's probably enjoying it for the most part. It's a fun series, and yeah, we've got plenty to come, so much more to look forward to. Similarly, we have volume 28 of Heike, and again, like with all the other volumes of this series, there's nothing I can say about this that I haven't said a million times before, especially because it comes out monthly. It's so much fun. I can't emphasize enough how funny, like how actually funny this series is. It really hits me, and I do laugh quite a bit when I'm reading this. But the characters are really great, and that's what lends it so much of its humor, because it does have so many quirky, weird characters, and they're so likable and interesting, and you know, you do root for them. You know, you want characters or teams to win or to succeed, and but even so, there is this like underlying tension of like, oh, how are things going to play out? People always argue that sports anime and manga are very predictable. They definitely have a formula, and that the, you know, protagonist team can never lose. But I disagree with that very strongly. Even if you know that a team is going to win, it's not so much about the destination as it is the journey. And with Haikyuu in particular, it really does emphasize and capitalize on the games themselves to provide character growth and to show how these characters have evolved and how they've grown and how they interact with each other and why they're doing certain things. So yeah, it's been really fun. As always, I'm caught up with the manga now. I've caught up probably 2 or 3 volumes ago. Now I'm up to date with the print release at least. And now I have to wait with everyone else, and I'm really excited for the next volume, but it's always hard because Heike especially is one that you sit down and you read it and it goes so quickly, and you're so excited for the next bit, and then you have to wait for the next volume. And luckily it's only a month, but still that month wait can be pretty hard. So yeah, volume 29 out very soon, and then we're heading into the 30s, and yeah, the series doesn't get any shorter. But I am looking forward to seeing how the series continues on from here, and I'm sure there's lots of fun to be had with these characters, and just, yeah, lots to enjoy. Now we have some Yona of the Dawn, volume 14. Again, a series that comes out fairly regularly. I think this comes out every 3 months, maybe. I feel like I'm always buying volumes of Yona, but I don't know. It is, again, as I've said before, because I've shown off every volume of this series since it started, I really, really enjoy this series. I think it's really interesting if you're someone who likes sort of faux historical settings, a la like maybe Fushigi Yugi, but I would personally relate it to something like the 12 Kingdoms, more so, with like a really interesting main female character and some great supporting cast. Yeah, again, I've said this every time, but it really does remind me of like the bygone era of shoujo manga, and we're still like, we're far behind. There's lots to catch up on with this series. I know there's like 27, 28 volumes out in Japan, but there's, and yeah, even though it has these similar themes and settings that you see in older shoujo, especially stuff from the 90s and early 2000s, it definitely feels, you know, its own thing. And you're not going to feel like you're getting deja vu constantly when you're reading it, comparing it to other series, whether they be better or worse. It is definitely its own thing. I think all of the characters are really fun to read, and I like, you know, pretty much everything about the series. They've gone some interesting directions with it. And again, it's just really, although it does have this element of like politics and royalty and scheming and this historical, almost fantasy setting, it never feels childish, and it doesn't ever feel like you're being talked down to in regards to the story. It makes some interesting decisions. And there's some certain plot lines in this that do get quite dark, and particularly in this volume. But yeah, I am looking forward to reading more whenever volume 15 comes out. I don't know when that'll be, but I know that I will enjoy it because it is a really great shoujo, and it's nice to see more shoujo coming out from Viz as well, because I mean, Viz puts out a lot of manga, but most of them are tended towards like male focus or come from like shonen or seinen magazines, which is fine. Like, that's great, and I enjoy plenty of those series. But and there are a lot of shoujo titles that they do put out as well, don't get me wrong, but the volume of shoujo in comparison to their shonen is, you know, it's way smaller. So it is nice to have like another long established ongoing shoujo coming from a major publisher, and yeah, I look forward to more, as I said. Continuing with Shoujo Beat titles, we have Natsume's Book of Friends, Volume 22, one of my all-time favorite manga series, or just series in general. I love the anime, I love the manga, everything about this series is phenomenal. The fact that even at 22 volumes, it still has such an emotional hit to it. It knows exactly how heavy to be without feeling melodramatic or heavy-handed. It's just a phenomenal series, and I'm so glad that it seems more and more people are finally taking notice of this series, because there was a long time when I felt like I was the only person buying this series and reading it. Obviously not the case, because it's still ongoing and people, like, Viz is still publishing it. But when you see manga collection after manga collection and nobody else has these books in their collection, you do start to feel like, oh, what, am I the only person who knows about this? Like, what's going on? So, yes, Natsume's Book of Friends, I've said this before, is near and dear to my heart. I absolutely adore it. One that I think anyone could read. You can recommend it to pretty much anyone. It's appropriate for any age level, any... I think it's fantastic for non-anime or manga fans. I think it does have general appeal because it does hit very universal human emotions and experiences. So, yeah, I think it exceeds really every expectation and just continues to get better and better and better. And I just, every time there's a new volume, I just get so happy because it's fantastic and one that I cannot wait to keep reading because, you know, we get these books maybe once every 6 months and it's just continues to be fantastic. I love it, and I'm sure plenty of you guys know it and love it or enjoy it, so maybe preaching to the choir here, but it's just, yeah, fantastic series. Adore it to bits. And yeah, as always, I cannot wait for more. Next, we actually have a debut volume, another Shoujo Beat title from Viz, and that is Ao Haru Ride by Io Sakisaka, which I haven't read any of her works yet. I know Strobe Edge is out in its entirety. But Ao Haru Ride is definitely her most well-known work. I've heard a lot of great things about it. I know there's an anime adaptation a couple years back now, which I haven't seen. But this is in line with a lot of maybe familiar high school drama romance series, but it's about a first year going on second year high school student who really doesn't like boys. She does everything to make herself seem unappealing to boys because in her middle school years she was pretty bullied by the other girls in her year by being cute and sweet, and so boys paid attention to her, and then she had no friends and pretty typical stuff. But she doesn't really like boys, never got on with them. But in her middle school days, she did have one boy that she liked. He thought he was really nice and very unlike other boys, and they sort of became friends, tenuous friends, and she doesn't really know her emotions, and then it's only after he moves away during the summer break that she realizes that she had a crush on him, and she never had the opportunity to tell him how she felt because there was a misunderstanding. They sort of got into kind of a fight, which was born from her own, you know, saying she didn't like boys and him overhearing that, and so he never showed up to their planned meeting place and all, you know, typical drama that you expect in these sorts of shoujo. But they've reconnected in high school, he's moved back, but his name's changed. His parents went through a divorce, which is one of the big reasons why he moved. And now he's really different from who he used to be. He's taller, you know, he's gone through puberty, so he looks, you know, deeper voice, obviously taller, larger, etc. So, very different from the boy that she knew. And he thinks that she's changed a lot because she's not very graceful. She just stuffs her face. She's, you know, she's just doesn't really care about what anyone else thinks because she's so caught up with not being bullied or losing her friends or having boys pay attention to her. And when she realizes that he is, you know, her first love, her lost love, she wants to try and reconnect their friendship or the potential that they had, go back to the best year of her life or whatever from back in middle school when they knew each other. But he says quite plainly, like, we're different people. I'm definitely a different person. You know, we've changed. We did like each other back then, but, you know, we don't necessarily like each other now. And very, like, it's honestly not a bad argument. Time does change people, and it is obvious that he's gone through some stuff. So, yeah, from, again, pretty typical high school shoujo romance. But I did really like this first volume. From everything I hear about this series, it gets nothing but praise. And I know that Sakisaka is definitely like a well-regarded mangaka, so I'm looking forward to actually starting this series. I had always wanted to get into Strobe Edge, but I just never had the opportunity to buy it as it was coming out. And I mean, I could still buy it now, but it just never got to the point where it was a priority for me to buy. So this being my first of her works, I'm really looking forward to it. I am hoping to still read Strobe Edge one day, but again, I don't know when that'll happen. But yeah, it's nice, and I think it's only 13 volumes long, so it's not super, super long comparatively to, like, Kimi Toroke, which is finishing this December. The final volume is coming out in December. Or things like Horimiya, or even, God, I can't think of anything because I don't follow too many high school romance dramas. But I really enjoyed it for this first volume. I think there's definitely potential here. I look forward to the next one, and from all of the wonderful things I hear about this series, I do have some pretty high hopes for it and some pretty great expectations. So yeah, I am happy that it seems that more, like, fan favorite series are being licensed and put out by publishers, and this just happens to be one of them. Another, I guess, technical debut is Volume 1 of the Kanzenban re-release of 20th Century Boys by Naoki Urasawa. I've said this before, but I've never read this series, and a lot of people really like it, although some people complain that it definitely jumps the shark at the end. It gets very confusing and convoluted, or just ridiculous. The only Urasawa works I have personally read are Monster and Pluto, both of which are very different, but I enjoy a lot. 20th Century Boys, I'm excited to give a shot. I know it's longer than either of those series, and a lot of people really love this series. A lot of people have pretty legitimate criticisms of it, so I'm hoping to see where I land on that spectrum. But even the people who criticize it, I think, do recognize that it's a fairly well-written story. I think Urasawa definitely has a knack of creating interesting like settings and plots, and that, although I mean he co-writes almost all of his things, and from what I know of this series, I don't know a huge amount about it, honestly, so it'll be a bit of a surprise, and I do think I will like it. Yeah, I think these re-releases are the perfect opportunity for me to pick them up, as with a lot of people, I think. The 20-odd volumes have been out for years at this point, and it's regarded as, like, one that a lot of people enjoy. So as I said, I'm looking forward to it. I do hope I like it as much as I don't think it'll be my favorite. My favorite so far has definitely been Pluto. I think Monster is a phenomenal series that has a couple pacing issues and is a little too bloated for what it is. And 20th Century Boys, I think, will also maybe fall into that category. I think it is so long, it'll have too many ideas being juggled, and whilst Urasawa's manga always has like a lot of potential, the execution isn't always there. So we'll see. But that didn't dissuade me from trying out this series. Again, it's one that I wanted to try for a long time. So I am happy that Viz is putting out such a nice, Kanzenban or perfect edition of this series. And I'll read this book, see how I go, see if I'll want to read more, and sort of assess it on a volume by volume basis. Because yeah, I do like Urasawa's work. I respect him a lot as an illustrator, but also as a writer. I do think he has some great ideas, but I do think that a lot of his stories do have some flaws, and he's not like infallible. I think there can be some really well-informed discussion and criticisms about series. So yeah, I don't think he's a perfect person, and none of his manga are in my like top 10 or anything, but I still do like his work a lot, and I think he's well deserved of his acclaim and reputation. But yeah, I will read this. I'll see how I like it. I'm sure I will like it. And yeah, as I said, just go from there. Next is another debut. This one is actually from Vertical. It's a seinen, I guess, romance, sort of. Coming of age story, After the Rain, volume 1. This is an omnibus, so 2-in-1 edition. There's 10 volumes in Japan, so 5 of these 2-in-1s. But again, this is another series that I still need to watch the anime. I know a lot of people really enjoyed it from a couple of seasons ago. It's in my queue, I just haven't gotten around to it. But it did appeal to me. I was pretty interested in it, so I was excited when the license was announced by Vertical, and I was excited to read this volume. And once again, Vertical, I think, definitely chooses some really interesting titles that I think maybe other publishers wouldn't necessarily, just because of the potential problems it could lead to in the future. And by that I mean this, and also My Boy. There are I haven't heard any like super controversies about this series in particular, but that doesn't mean anything. Especially for my perspective, and I guess the Western perspective, there are themes that are covered in certain manga that aren't really, appropriate. There's a lot of issues with like age differences and romance and that sort of thing. And again, like I said, like with My Boy, there's nothing particularly problematic in either that manga or this manga. It's about a high school girl who works at a family diner, and she sort of has this like a crush on her manager, who's, a divorcee 40-odd-year-old man. And she's really quite aggressive about her interest in him. And yeah, I have generally, and you see it a lot in BL and that sort of thing, and shoujo manga and seinen manga. You see it a lot in manga. Large age gaps of romantic relationships, and for me, I don't enjoy them. I think that's really, like, I don't like it. The power imbalance is too much. The maturity difference is just too much. But so far in this series, although it does have elements of this girl who has this crush on her boss or her co-worker, I guess, it isn't played as like this true love or anything. I do think the series is more so a story about finding that, or relying on the kindness of others, and like finding yourself through other people, and learning to love yourself and that sort of thing, rather than like a true romantic relationship. Because I think that one of the big reasons she is interested in him, or loves him, quote unquote, is because of the kindness that he showed her, and that he doesn't really have any expectations for her comparatively to her family or her friends. Because, as a 40-odd-year-old, like, when you're older, you realize, like, how much that high school your teen years shouldn't be so stressful, and a lot of the mistakes you make don't matter in the long run, and a lot of the stresses that you put yourself under because you're so self-critical and you want to exceed expectations and you want to excel are, like, you have to be able to enjoy your youth whilst you have it. And that makes me sound so old, but I think that is definitely, like, the main angle for this series, is more so than like a legitimate romantic relationship between our two main characters. It's more so about our main female character sort of accepting and finding that out for herself, rather than, like, pushing on a romance between a 16-year-old and a 45-year-old. So, yes, as I said, maybe a little riskier manga, because this one's better because it is actually finished, so you don't have the unknown element of how it's going to end, like with My Boy. But, it's not for everyone. I did enjoy this first volume, or these first two volumes, I guess I should properly say. And I think I will continue to buy it. It's very beautiful. I do really like how it's written, and sort of the atmosphere. The art is very beautiful. And I think it's just got this real atmosphere to it that is somewhat nostalgic, although I've never been in this character's shoes. I've never had these experiences, but I do think it does appeal to that nostalgia of youth almost, and sort of the perspectives you gain as you get older, and sort of learn more about the world and yourself and that sort of thing. So yeah, really liked it. I think it's a great new title from Vertical so far, at least. I know that a lot of people really loved the anime, so I'm sure I'm sure that caused some interest. So check it out if that sounds interesting to you. And it's not super long either, so yeah, another really strong debut. I'm glad that we're getting some good new manga, as some of old favorites are coming to a close. Speaking of coming to a close, we have the penultimate volume of Descending Stories Showa Genroku Rakugo Shinju, Volume 9 out of 10. What a beautiful cover. I, again, adore this series. It's phenomenal. It's everything, I could hope or dream for. I really hope that with Funimation's online sales of the anime that they're doing currently, we may see a disc release for the anime version of the show soon, or the series soon. Yeah, we're getting close to the end. I'm going to be sad, and then I'm going to reread the entire thing, because it's one that is an experience in and of itself. It's just, everything about it is phenomenal. And Vertical Kodansha have done a great job with this series. I cannot wait for December, which is when the last volume comes out. I'm going to be sad, but also happy, because again, I've said it before, this series is one that would never have been licensed 5 years ago. And the fact that we're in a current market trend that it has been licensed and has been released in its entirety, or will be released in its entirety, is just phenomenal. Like, that's just amazing to me. It's really an indication of how much better things have gotten for fans. Yeah, it's just wonderful, and I'm just so happy to have the series in English, and almost completed in English. Next is Volume 5 of Again by Mitsuru Kubo. And I said with Volume 4, something happened that completely shifted the status quo, shook everything up, and I love it. It was unexpected. It gave the series so many more avenues to explore, so much more potential for story. And it was really, honestly exciting to see how this series will continue. We're almost halfway through. There's 12 volumes of the series. And I'll say it again, Mitsuru Kubo is fantastic at comics. Just in general, I think how she puts out her paneling, how her characters express themselves, the flow of the action and the dialogue, and just the fluidity of everything, and how the characters really capture your attention. Just every element of it is done expertly, and regardless of whether you enjoy her series or not, I think it's important to recognize that. But needless to say, I enjoy her series. This and Moteki are two very different creatures insofar as plot goes, but her character writing, she definitely likes the somewhat lovable loser type, but even though she has that main character trope as her main character, she doesn't let them off easy. She definitely puts them to work in redeeming themselves and bettering themselves, which is fantastic to see in seinen manga, because all too often the hero has a lot of issues, has a lot of problems, has a lot of self-caused problems and personality problems, but are never held accountable for that. So, you know, it's refreshing to see that, and it's just, yeah, this continues on, obviously, from the previous volume. The revelations of that last volume paid dividends to this one. There's a lot of things that are impacted from the events of the previous volume, and it's interesting to see how those things have played out, and how this volume ends makes me really excited for the next one. I just am loving this series. Everything about it, I think I audibly laugh, I actually laugh properly, out loud, proper, not just a little chuckle, but actual laughter when I read this series, because there's so much to it. There's so much character and life, and you know, just wonderful little moments within the story that give it this dimension that I think other manga don't necessarily have. And when this is done, I'm gonna be sad, but I want more Kubo manga, because obviously she knows what she's doing, and she's proven it to me, at least, with both of the series she has available in English. Yeah, she can write such complex characters in ways that make you enjoy them or root for them, or at least be engaged with their story, even if you don't necessarily like their choices or like who they are as a person. And that's a real skill. Again, this is a series that it seems that Kodansha has put a lot of love into, because the translation seems pretty on point. A lot of really good work being done. And yeah, I mean, Kubo, as I said, her art just jumps off of the page. It has so much personality. I love, love, love how she does her lining. I mean, I'm not an artist in any sense of the word, but her, like, how she lines her characters, just how she uses her inks, everything is just wonderful. So yeah, again, was fantastic once again. So yeah, volume 6 cannot come quickly enough. Next is a volume that's been out for a couple months now at this point, and that is Waterkoi Love is Hard for Otaku Volume 2, which is actually Omnibus 2, so it's volumes 3 and 4. This is a really fun 4-koma manga about office workers who have fairly otaku-y personalities and who are dating, basically. We have our main character who's total Fujo, really likes shoujo manga and BL, and writes her own doujinshi and all of that. And her childhood friend, now boyfriend, who is absolute gamer, just plays games constantly, all sorts of games. And then there are 2 office buddies, I guess. One who is a cosplayer. She's also sort of a Fujo, but has very different tastes comparatively to our main character. But she cosplays almost basically professionally. And is really involved in that culture. And then her boyfriend, who is more of just a general fan otaku who watches anime and likes more typical shonen and shoujo stuff, and isn't as into everything as the rest of his friends are. He's probably the most level-headed and put together of the 4, and it also acts mostly as the straight man to their hijinks whenever it happens. This is a really funny, sweet story. I'm a sucker for these sorts of things. Again, this is one with a recent anime adaptation. It took me a couple months to get the 2nd volume, just because these are pretty pricey for what they are. I know they're 2-in-1s, and I know they're Kodansha, so they're at the regular price point, and they are an over large trim size. And whilst I do really enjoy this series, I wasn't going to pay what the new just being released prices were, so I waited for a sale. And yeah, I mean, it's a really fun, sweet, funny series. Really topical and probably relatable to an extent in regards to, obviously, otaku interests. If you enjoy elements of Genshiken, or if you enjoy Genshiken, this is somewhat of a lighter version of this. It doesn't go super deep into, the whole process and culture of otaku that series does, but it definitely appeals to that same sort of audience. The comedy is very relatable. The characters are all really fun and interesting, and I think they interact off of each other really well, which is always important for a 4-coma and especially a comedy. So yeah, I mean, some great stuff. Really enjoyed it. Volume 3 is out really soon, which is, I think, the beginning of new stuff. So if you've seen the anime, everything in this book and the previous book was in the show, but next book will have new stuff. At least from what I can understand of it, that seems to be the case. And then we'll have to wait for volume 4 because I don't know how many volumes are out in Japan. I think 7 or so. So because these are 2-in-1s, we will have to wait until the 8th. But yeah, Watakoi Love is Hard for Otaku is really, really fun. And yeah, if you're looking for a good 4-coma and you're already caught up on Nozaki-kun, check this one out, because Nozaki-kun and things like Horimiya as well, I think, really appeal or are very similar in comedy stylings to this one. So yeah. This next one I don't think I'm going to get completely in frame, but I'm going to try. It's Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon, the Eternal Edition by Naoko Takeuchi. Obviously, Sailor Moon really needs no introduction. These are the beautiful, large, trim collector's editions of Sailor Moon, the original manga that inspired the anime and inspired a generation of young girls, etc., etc. My sister owns the Kodansha box sets of there's 2 boxes with 6 volumes each in them, and I hadn't really, I mean, I knew of Sailor Moon and I'd seen some of it, and I've said this whenever I buy the anime, that I am not a nostalgic fan of Sailor Moon, mainly because I was never given the opportunity to watch it or get into it when I was younger and it was, you know, more directly appealing to me. But I have read the manga. I do really like the manga. And I wanted to get a copy for myself, a set for myself, as I said. The set that maybe many of you have seen in my collection videos previously isn't actually mine, it's my sister's. So this, again, seems like a good opportunity to pick up the series. Now that we're getting these beautiful releases from Kodansha. They are very pricey. I got this one and I've pre-ordered this one, the 2nd, 3rd, and I think the 4th one for a much reduced price from a local website. Pre-ordered them because, yeah, current prices are very, very high. And this is a big book. It's definitely very high quality. It's got the archival paper, very similar to the Full Metal editions of Full Metal Alchemist that are coming out right now. It's soft cover, but it's larger than a lot of books that you see currently. I think it's roughly the same size as something like Fantagraphics releases, or if anyone has Thermae Romai, which was a Yen Press release, like really big, like bigger than like the signature editions, bigger than Barefoot Gen, bigger than a lot of other books that you see currently. The trim size is just completely different. It has all of the color pages. It has updated artwork done by Takeuchi herself. Or revised artwork, I should say, and a new translation. So they've obviously put in a lot of money. This is definitely for collectors and existing fans, for people who already know the series and aren't worried about paying more for a premium, similarly to how the Full Metal editions of Full Metal Alchemist are appealing to existing fans. This isn't a release that's necessarily for people who've never read or seen the show before. And as I said, I have read the series, so I do know that I like it. I did enjoy it a lot. And this is sort of quintessential 90s magical girl. It defined how that generation of magical girls was done. So it was neat, like, without question, why I decided to pick it up. It's a beautiful book. And as I said, I do have some future volumes pre-ordered already, but I am going to be picking these up when they're at a cheaper price, because at retail price or at current prices that I'm seeing a lot online, it's a lot of money. And if you're a Sailor Moon fan, die hard, love everything, owned every version, then that's probably fine for you and you don't mind buying them. But if you are more of a casual fan, or you haven't read any Sailor Moon, or you're just wanting to try the series out, but you do want this Eternal Edition, I would say, yeah, wait for a sale, or wait where you can find a cheaper version, cheaper copy, I should say. Because I can't say that this isn't worth the money. It's definitely had a lot of work put into it, a lot of love, and is sort of the perfect package for fans. Just like, again, the Fullmetal editions, I keep coming back to it, but it's a perfect comparison. These sorts of releases that publishers are putting out more and more they're not the type that are going to sell, 100,000 copies off of the shelves in Barnes and Noble. They're the ones that people who love the series and have already read it or watched it or owned it in 3 different versions are going to buy. Like I said, this Eternal Edition, the Fullmetal editions, but even things like Nazca of the Valley of the Wind, or Akira from last year, or the Pandora box, Pandora Hearts set. All of those titles, as well as like even the classics collection that Seven Seas are putting out now, they're appealing to collectors, for people who are buying manga to have the best version possible, or to cultivate a collection of their favorites, or of titles that they love and or deem culture, like however people collect, they are appealing to those collectors more so than just, the 15-year-old who's read half a dozen volumes of Naruto and wants to find something else. This book isn't for them, and that's fine. I do think it's great to have different options within the market. Like with Akira, they still have the paperback flipped copies around that have been around forever. Fullmetal Alchemist obviously has the standard singles and the complete series box set that Viz put out. Sailor Moon, as I've mentioned, has two box sets, 2 6-volume box sets that are still available from pretty much anywhere by Kodansha. So if you're wanting to read these series, you don't have to spend these extra exorbitant I can't speak today. You don't have to pay a huge amount to read them. There are cheaper options and cheaper copies available. But for me and other collectors and other people who love those series to death, the collector's edition is a great version to have and to keep and to treasure for a long, long time. And that's why it is more so that they are expensive, because they are meant to last for years and years and years and years and years, and become something that's really a focal point of the collection. So that's my 2 cents on it. I know that probably a lot of people will skip over this release just because, as I said, there's cheaper options. But if you are a Sailor Moon fan, this is definitely Kodansha have definitely done a great job with it. It's beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. Finally, we have Volume 5 of With the Light, Raising an Autistic Child. As you can probably see, this one's a little bit beat up, but this volume is so hard to find that the fact that I have pretty much a new copy, it has a couple, cover bends and that sort of thing, but nothing too egregious. And I got it for just a little bit more, probably $10 more than the retail price, is a miracle, because this book is going for like at least $100 online generally. So I lucked out big time. And with this was the last volume that I had to purchase. It's the fifth volume that I have in the collection with me, but the other 3 volumes I sent to my proxy. I have bought them. They have gotten there, but just haven't reached me yet because I haven't made a shipment yet. This I mentioned it when I picked up the first couple volumes of this series, but this is a phenomenal manga. This is one that it truly is an underrated manga. It's one that doesn't appeal to most manga fans. It's one that has a very niche audience and I guess plot and sort of theme to it, but it's one that I think if people tried and read would just love. I think it's written with a lot of care and a lot of respect, because it is talking about, like, obviously autism in society and having an autistic family member, and in this case about a parent sort of having to learn about autism and adapt and know how you can best serve your child with their schooling, at home, and just understanding them. That it's done with so much respect towards autism and towards people who have autism and who have family or friends with autism, because as I've said with previous volumes when I've shown them off, autism is something that I think most people in life have encountered, whether it be directly within family or friends or in the workplace. It's not so much an unknown thing anymore. I've said this, but I personally don't have any family with autism, but I do have quite a few friends who have autistic family members, so siblings and that sort of thing. So I think most people are conscious of autism or have some exposure to autism, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have an understanding of autism. And I think this sort of manga definitely opens up those channels of discussion, of allowing people to learn about autism in a educational but not overbearing way, and without ever feeling like being heavy-handed or just anything like that. I flipped, because I haven't read all of the volumes that I have, because I only have the first volume here at my house in my collection. I only have volume 1, 4, 5, 6, and 8. So 2, 3, and 7 are with my proxy. So it's meant that I haven't really been able to read past the first volume with this series. But flipping through, I just get completely sucked into the story, even if I don't, I haven't followed the chapters up until this point. I don't know necessarily the chronology of the series yet. you still, like, I personally don't have a problem reading it and then just being completely absorbed and then finding out you finish the volume and you're like, oh no, that I wasn't trying to do that. That's not what was supposed to happen. But I think that is really, really wonderful how easily you can get absorbed into the story. And I do also think it has a great rereadability. So it's one you can come back to time and time again. Definitely a manga that has a wider appeal outside of just manga fans. And you can tell just from the advertisements at the back of this book, rather than your typical, oh, here's a bunch of other Yen Press titles coming out. You have books from Hachette, which is Yen's like main publisher overhead, the main publishing body, where Yen is just a subsidiary line. But a lot of books about autism and having children with autism, memoirs and those sorts of things. You can see there's definitely like a market that they're cornering with this manga and trying to appeal to. And there's also a book written by a author with autism, which again, you know, it's definitely not one that necessarily a general manga fan would find interest in, but if you were looking for fiction that involved characters with autism or other developmental disabilities, because it isn't just autism that's covered in this series, then this is a great recommendation. It definitely has a broader appeal. And this book, I read parts of it. It was so sweet. It's so good. I love it so, so much. This series, when I finally get all the books here with me, I'm going to sit down and give it a proper read. And I'm just, oh, my heart gets so warm. At least in volume 5, because it's about graduation and you know how much things have changed and how much our main character Hikaru has grown, and how much better he's doing with when he's surrounded by people who understand him and care about him and aren't going to cause trouble just because he's a little bit different than everyone else. It's so good, and I don't necessarily expect a lot of people to go out and buy this based on my recommendation, especially considering it is incredibly out of print. A lot of the volumes are very hard to find, but if you come across it in the wild, it's definitely one to get into, because it's unlike anything else, and it's a really, really wonderful manga. Well, that's everything that I got for this first half of October. So many more manga than I expected, but a lot of really solid debuts for this first half of the month. I'm really happy to finally get the free movie collection. That was something I've been waiting for months, so don't blame me that I'm pretty excited about it. But everything that I've read of this large stack of series so far, I've enjoyed immensely, and there's a lot of really great titles coming out currently, and things just keep getting better and better, and every time there's new licensing announcements, not every time, but a lot of the times, there's always at least one thing I'm interested in, and I'm not being disappointed by much, fortunately and unfortunately for my wallet. And so far as series continuing, as I mentioned, Descending Stories will be finished in one more volume, so that's another completed series in my collection. Things like Toradora has one more volume. Something else is finishing soon as well. Everyone's Getting Married has one more volume out. Devil's Line has 1 or 2 more volumes out. So there are certain series that I'm completing as well. So I try to finish the stuff that I have before starting something new. And just recently that was, I mean, there's titles like Nobara no O and Banana Fish that I have been doing that with, but there are so many good things coming out that I can't really keep up. Thankfully, I mean, I can't complain, as I've said. It's always a good thing to have good manga and anime coming out. Speaking of anime, I'll mention it again because I've been talking for so long and you may have forgotten, but I did mention that Nozomi Entertainment, or Right Stuff, is currently holding a Kickstarter to fund the English dub and the Blu-ray release of Emma, A Victorian Romance, the adaptation of Kaoru Mori's Emma, which is a fantastic show. They've put it out on DVD previously, but only subtitled only. So if you're interested in dubbed anime, that's a great one to get behind and support. Even if you're not a fan of dubbed anime, it is also the Blu-ray release, so that's super exciting. And it is the only Blu-ray release in the world. Even Japan doesn't have Blu-rays, so that's pretty cool. There's a really, really wonderful art book that's attached as an add-on. From what I've heard of audition clips, they're doing a great job with keeping the dub both period and setting accurate. So a lot of, I mean, it's obviously set in Victorian England, so they're being very conscientious about choosing voice actors who are either British or who can do a convincing British accent. They also have a dialect and I guess accent coach, or someone to oversee how it's being written, who is British herself. So that's really, really great to see. And even at like $1, $5, you do get access to the Slacker backer after the campaign, which means you can buy the discs before the general release, even if you don't have the money to pledge right now. But if you are wanting the super nice, fancy, limited edition chipboard edition, you will have to get it through the Kickstarter pledges, because that will not be available after the fact in the Slacker backer. And I don't know how many people have seen the Emma DVD limited editions. Those were the versions I own currently and previously, obviously up until this point, but Nozomi Entertainment does a great job with their limited editions. They have really, really sturdy chipboard for one. They use a lot of really beautiful art, and they put a lot of work into their info booklets and everything else. They really put a lot of love into their releases, so you know that your money is definitely going to be used well. And obviously, Nozomi Entertainment is a very well-established company within Western anime circles. Obviously, this isn't just some up-and-coming group that's going to disappear with your money in 6 months' time. You will definitely get your product, so you don't have to feel, sketchy about supporting it. So yes, there's 3 more days until funding ends, the funding period ends for that. So the last 2 days, of course, most crucial, and hopefully we'll get a big push. We are so close to season 2's dub being funded, and I guess the Blu-rays are included with that. So yeah, if you are interested and you are wanting to help out the cause, once again, I will put the link in the description, and any little bit helps. But, you know, aside from that, I'm really super happy about all the things that I got. Even the kind of curiouser ones, things like Goodbye Geist and With the Light, and my new debuts with Alhara Ride, and of course Sailor Moon and 20th Century Boys and After the Rain. Some really great stuff. I don't know what's coming in the second half of October aside from a handful of manga. Maybe some other things. I don't know, and I don't know how large my monthly pickups are going to be. But we'll see when we get there, as always. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Put a comment on if you agree with my opinions, or you've also collected some of these titles, or you completely disagree on my opinions. That's also cool. As well, in the description, I will have a link to my Twitter, which is always there. You can always reach me via that. And as well as my Book Depository affiliate link, which is no obligation to use that, but it is a great website and service for those who are outside of the US and want to buy manga in copious amounts, like myself. That's a great option, free shipping, great customer service, great prices, really super competitive to everywhere else. And yeah, I think that's it. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye till then.